Welcome into another episode of the Throwing Chairs podcast. It is episode 14 of the second season of TCP. And once again, we've got quite a lot to talk about, a lot that happened here in the Big Ten. We won't touch on it all, but one major news that is coming up for Indiana and will affect their game on Sunday. We'll talk about that here just in a short amount of time. But without further ado, I'm your host, Hayden Smith, joined alongside the Hoosier Network's finest, Audrey Marr and Thomas Montalbano. Guys, we're going to get this episode started like we do every episode of the Throwing Chairs podcast with our icebreaker of the day. And in light of it being Valentine's Day at the time that we are recording this podcast, it's always a big thing with V-Day with chocolate. So I want to get your all's favorite chocolate type of candy. It doesn't just have to be straight up chocolate. It can have chocolate in it. So like Reese's or Twix, anything like that. Audrey, we'll start with you.
This is surprising because this is one I don't even have to think about. I am going with Kit Kats. I love Kit Kats.
I can get behind that.
Yeah.
I can
Very
get behind that.
respectable answer.
So good.
My mind immediately went to Twix. I had Twix last night.
All right.
Twix is definitely top three. Reese's is there. Kit Kat is also there, but Reese's and Twix are definitely above it. I think a Milky Way is honorable mention too.
Have you all ever had the Mr. Beast bars?
I have.
Have you
I
had
had
those
once.
yet? Because
Are they actually? I heard they're horrible.
what? Where did you
Yeah.
hear that from?
I don't know.
Somebody
I just heard that
lied.
they're
Yeah, I like them a
very,
lot.
very bad.
No, I personally think it is better than Hershey's.
Wow.
What?
It's
Wow.
good.
Wow.
I don't agree with
It's
either
just-
of those takes. I'm definitely in the middle.
The chocolate's just rich. I don't know. I don't really know how to describe it, but I'll certainly say my pick besides Mr. Beast bars would probably be Reese's. I want to know what you all say. Do you all say Reese's or Reese's?
Reese's, for sure.
I did say Reese's. I go Reese's now, I think.
Reese's.
Yeah. I don't know. It's something that I just really, I don't have set in my mind. I think one day I'll say Reese's and one day I'll say Reese's.
That's fair.
I really don't
I
know.
think like Reese's is like the quote unquote correct way. I don't know, but I've always
Reese's.
said
I don't know.
Reese's.
No,
the
because
whole
we need to
time.
I think it's Reese's Pieces.
Reese's Pieces. All right, there
Yeah,
you go.
I think it's Reese's.
So maybe we are
Because
correct.
Reese's Pieces.
Reese's PC. That just doesn't sound right.
That just does not make sense.
Well, I mean, it's a Valentine's Day. We're all here together. There we go. All right. Well, let's get started with this episode of TCP. And the first thing that we're going to bring up is sort of a downer topic for the Indiana Hoosiers as they're coming off one of their worst performances of the season, losing at Mackey to the Purdue Boilermakers 79-59. Guys, just initial takeaways. We were all there together at Mackey, so just want to get your all's quick thoughts of that game.
Yeah, I'd say more overall, like Indiana obviously did not perform the way that they wanted to, but I think that the loss more shows how strong of a team Purdue is more than how poorly Indiana has been doing in recent games. I mean, with Zach Edey making that three-pointer and just plays like that, I mean, on all aspects of the floor, Purdue was just dominating the game. So I think it just really more shows why Purdue is the number 2 team in the nation. And that's just an overall takeaway.
Yeah, I agree 100% with everything Audrey just said. You knew it was going to be a tough matchup for the Hoosiers, one of the toughest for the entire years, and it certainly played out that way. The game got out of hand probably right around the point where we thought it would. They had a strong start, as they usually do to a lot of their games, and then Purdue just kind of ran away with it. They had a very strong second half. Indiana also had a pretty poor second half, but yeah, you mentioned it, Edey with that three. That was almost like the epitome of how the game went. Purdue just had full control start to finish of that game.
Yeah, I'm just going to quickly say, I mean, in my mind of where Indiana's really been this season, I don't think in any scenario they were going to win that basketball game. Purdue is just way too good of a team and so much better than Indiana is this year, clearly. But, I mean, any scenario, even with Xavier Johnson, I don't think Indiana wins that basketball game. A fully healthy Indiana team is not going to beat the Purdue Boilermakers at Mackey Arena. And again, it really showed, especially whenever things got tough there to end the first half of play, it showed that Indiana is still lacking that true bucket getter out there on the court. They're lacking that Jalen Hood-Schifino like they had last year that has the ability to put the ball on the deck and make a couple mid-range shots. Indiana really just doesn't have that guy. Trey Galloway showed flashes at times, and especially in the game that took place in Assembly Hall. And the same thing with Malik Renew, but Renew hasn't gotten to that point that Trace Jackson Davis got to his junior year where he's able to dish out of double teams and just be a lot smarter with the basketball down low. So, I mean, that was really what I took away from that game. I don't think there's any really scenario that Indiana wins that game. And again, we all mentioned it about how Zach Edey's three really was a huge turning point for Purdue in that ball game. That was in the first half, I believe.
No, it was the second half.
It was the second half.
Yeah.
It was the second half. So, yeah, I mean, that was a huge turning point for the Boilermakers, but I just want to get your all's I just want to pick your all's brain of when you all really thought that the game started turning away from Indiana.
Well, it was funny because me and Audrey were talking about that in our post-game discussion, like when exactly was the point. And I mentioned that there was a couple different points. I think it's tough to pinpoint an exact point. But being in the media room for that second half of the game, I probably will go to that Zach Edey three. I think the game was already kind of away from the Hoosiers, but that really put the nail on the head. I mean that was history for someone who continues to make history. This time it was on the Hoosiers were on the receiving end of it, and hearing that from the press room, you heard it first from the stadium, and we're like, oh God, what just happened? And then you see Edey drill the three, and before he drilled the three, I think it was Drew Rosenberg, shout out Drew, who said like Edey's got to hit a three or something. Something big had to have happened, and Edey drilled a three. Maybe it was Matt Press. It was definitely one of those two guys. But I think that was the turning point of the game. That was definitely one of the big highlights, if not the biggest highlight of the game. Yeah, I don't know. I'd probably say that point.
Yeah, I think you can definitely look at that point and name that as probably the turning point. But I would honestly just say, coming out of the second half, I think Indiana going into halftime, that's when they really started to pick things up. And Trey Galloway had scored 6 back-to-back points and then scored 10 points just in the first half. He would never score another point again in the game. Yeah, so I think that was a massive piece. I think Purdue just had a better overall game plan in that second half than Indiana did. And I think you could definitely look at that Zach Edey three as really just the nail in the coffin for Indiana. I think that they were already in a consistent 20-point lead, and then Zach Edey's three completely just expanded that, and just really set Purdue even more in motion than they already were. And again, like I said before, it just showed how strong of a team they actually are.
Yeah, it sucked what little life Indiana had left just right out of them. And they right off the bat, they were playing a solid game, but that was way back in the first half. At this point with the Edey three, it was in the second half, and like you mentioned, they were up by 15 to 20 the entire game. And after that, it was definitely kind of the point of no return, because Edey's also only taking that shot when you're comfortable taking it at that point in the game, and he clearly was, and he knocked it down, and the game got away from them. Yeah,
I believe that was only his second ever career attempt from the 3-point line, and I guess the bank was open. And he knocked it down. I'm going to go a little bit earlier on in the game whenever it really started getting away from Indiana. I'm going to say at the 6-minute mark of the first half, because Indiana is still in the basketball game, and I think it was only about a 4 or 5 point game at that current time. But then Khalil Ware picked up his third foul and then was immediately benched for the remainder of the first half. Even right there at the end of the first half, when Indiana had a chance to get one last shot, Mike Woodson still didn't put him in the basketball game, even though he's 7 foot tall and can easily just put one up over anybody except for Zach Edey. But as soon as he picked up that third foul, Purdue went on a 15-5 run to close out the first half of play, and then Indiana just, like you all said, they had no life there in that second half, and it was a complete 180 once again from what we saw in the Ohio State game on the road. Again, this Purdue team is not Ohio State, and obviously because Purdue didn't just fire their head coach, Ohio State did. So it shows how different of a team Purdue is and how much better of a team Purdue is so far in this season. Thomas, you have something else?
Yeah, to your point right there, Galloway said exactly that in the post-game press conference. They actually asked him, what's the difference between coming back against a team like Purdue and coming back from down 18 against Ohio State? And he said it pretty much exactly like you did. Purdue just has much more experience. They're quite frankly just a much better team on paper. And they know how to defend home court, and they did exactly that. And so once they got the lead, it was just a much, much different circumstance than playing those guys at Ohio State.
Guys, we've mentioned it on the podcast already here today, and we had a very lengthy discussion on the way back from West Lafayette about the environment that took place on Saturday night in Mackey Arena. Is Mackey really a top 5 environment?
I would have to go, wow. I'd have to go with yes. Honestly, you can't go into it. Like, going into it from the outside, and I had never been to Mackey before, but actually being there and just actually realizing how much of an environment, how many traditions they have. I mean, it was just crazy. I mean, coming out, because Thomas, you were there in the first half. I was in the media room the first half, so we kind of switched it off. But the first thing I am actually experiencing while covering this game is when they're doing the sandstorm dance. And, I mean, it was actually just crazy. And I think especially when that Zach Edey 3 happened, you could really just tell how much of the fan base is almost together. And, yeah, I don't know. I just think overall, I think with the almost it being smaller makes the environment even that more big, because, I mean, it's just such a small arena that everything is almost just so much louder. Sorry, I just went on a tangent. I don't know why I did.
No.
But go ahead, Thomas.
Yeah, is it a top 5 environment? My answer is no doubt. First of all, I've only been to the environments I've been to throughout this season, so it's not too many. It's less than 10. So top 5, no doubt. That's definitely top 3 for me. That was unbelievable. I don't want to say too much because I know Hayden will not be happy with me, but that was a very, very cool and fun experience. It was very, very loud, to say the least. I didn't get to see the sandstorm dance, but obviously I've seen the viral videos a couple weeks ago. But I got to see like the player introductions and everything, and their version of like the Martha the Mop Lady video, and that was insane. That, I don't want to say what it actually made me feel like I told you guys there, but that their unity, as you said, and every single fan knows every single word, and every single fan knows every single dance, and yeah, it was very cool. And what was also cool is we had that person next to us. I'm blanking on his name.
He was so nice.
I know. I have his name.
XL Sports or something. Yeah.
But he was all, and what was great was he was like preparing me almost. He's like, get ready for this, like cover your ears. I don't even know, but it was very, very cool. I don't know. I think everybody should get to experience that at least once in their life, and I'm glad we got to be there for the rivalry.
Yeah, and I think it almost made it better be that it was the rivalry game. I mean, we had walked in, what was it, like 2.5 hours, 2 hours before tip-off, and the line was completely all around Mackey Arena. And I think, I mean, you would have thought that it was a 1 versus 2 matchup, but, like, I mean, basketball is just so special in Indiana. And I don't think anybody can beat that type of environment. And no one actually knows until you're actually there.
There's no question that this year Mackey is a top 5 environment. There's no question. I mean, we saw it firsthand whenever we were there on Saturday. I will also say they can clap a lot better than Assembly Hall fans can. They are a lot more in sync than the Indiana student section and the Indiana fans usually are. Granted, Indiana just has, I don't know, they do a couple different things.
That just reminded me, too, just off that point, when they had the flashlights and the swaying back and forth, you remember, to start the game, like that? I don't know. I'm not that I was intimidated, but I can see people get intimidated by that. It's a lot.
Again, I'll say this year it doesn't compare, but I'll say whenever Indiana is good, Mackey does not compare to Assembly Hall's environment.
I 100% agree. The question was about Mackey. I stand by that.
That's exactly right. But Mackey historically has been a very difficult place to play. But I'll take Assembly Hall over it 10 times out of 10. So let's continue moving on here with this podcast.
No one gets another point in that.
Not
Go
at
ahead,
all.
Hayden.
We're moving on to our next subject. Guys, Indiana scored 59 points. That is their second lowest scoring output of the season. The only other two, one being to Rutgers, and the other one earlier this season against UConn, where they scored 57 in both games. Despite 4 players being in double figures, you would have thought maybe Indiana would have at least hit the 60-point mark, but it didn't just happen. Just looking at the game and watching it, why is that? Why did Indiana score so low?
I think a big part of it was Malik Renew's performance. I mean, he shot 3 for 11. He finished with 6 points, and then he got fouled out with, I think it was 7 minutes left in the game. And I think a big factor to that would that Indiana would have scored a lot more if Malik Renew had been more in his element in that game. I think Purdue definitely locked down on defense on him, and I think that's a big thing that a lot of their opponents are doing is locking more down on either Malik Renew other than Khalil Ware, and that's what you can tell. That's what they did, and I mean, Mike Woodson had said that he just wasn't Malik Renew, but I think you can also just attribute that to Purdue's defense. I think it was very strong from the get-go, and especially with him not playing those last 7 minutes. And also looking at the free throws. I mean, Purdue had made 21 of 33 free throws, and Indiana had made 9 of 15. I mean, Zach Edey himself made 11 free throws out of 16. So you have to look. The free throws have been a massive point in Indiana's almost downfalls sometimes this season. And you can't let that get away from you in a game like this with a 7'4" center on the forefront. I don't know. I think overall Malik Renew was a massive contributor, and then looking at the free throws as well.
Yep, Malik Renew, I'm just going to say the same thing. He's definitely the main factor. They not only did he not play his best self, as you pointed out that Mike Woodson said, but he was missing for a good chunk of the game. Indiana shot 42% as a team. That's not terrible, and you'd like it to be a little bit better, but I think they should have shot more. I also want to say beyond Malik Renew, Galloway, he didn't score in the second half, and he's definitely one of their bigger scoring factors, especially with Renew out there. Galloway's maybe the number one guy you would look to spark the team and go on a run, and with him scoreless in the second half, you can imagine that the team is scoreless right behind him. And beyond that, Khalil Ware I thought played a pretty solid game, but I think he should have shot more. He was 5 for 7. He was having a good shooting night. And he only finished with 11 points. And, with Malik Renew out, your fellow big man, someone else had to step up. I just mentioned it wasn't Galloway, and I would have liked to see Khalil Ware shoot more.
Yeah, I think overall it was also just their overall shot-making ability as well. I mean, they had so many open shots. Like, they could have easily shot a 3. I'm thinking of one, I think it was in the second half. I mean, Anthony Walker was wide open beyond the arc, and then he decides to run in and do a jumper, two-point jumper. I mean, that just, and obviously it didn't go in. I mean, just stuff like that. I mean, you have open opportunities to get even more points, and multiple times as well when you're wide open. So I think just their decision making when going in for shots was a little.
No, I couldn't agree more.
Off.
And I'm just going to add real quick. I thought you were going to say, I think it was Anthony Walker who drove in, drew another defender, kicked it out to Cups for a wide open 3. He shot faked it, dribbled it in, took an off balance mid range, and it bricked. But yeah, it's just another example. It's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, you all made great points. And to go off your point, Thomas, about Khalil Ware, he looked a little bit different than how he did in that first matchup against Purdue. I will give him credit. He actually attacked Zach Edey a couple times, and he did not do that whenever the game was played here in Assembly Hall. He kind of just floated around the perimeter. So it was a step in the right direction for him. Khalil was probably one of the better players for Indiana on Saturday, besides another one, which we'll touch on him here in just a few minutes. But I'll also say you're never going to win in the Big Ten except for probably a game against Rutgers whenever you score 25 points in one half of basketball. You're never going to win. Again, the only team that you could probably compete with is Rutgers because they score so little, or I'll even throw Michigan in there because they're just atrocious this year. But yeah, I mean, Indiana's shot-making ability, like you all said, it just wasn't there. They had those open opportunities, but they just weren't able to convert on them. I'd love to see Gabe Cupps shoot a little bit more than he is. Mm-hmm. I understand it's not the role that he was expected to have this season. Of course, he's taken a huge role this year with Xavier Johnson being out for most of the season. So he probably thought and he probably is more of a spot-up shooter. He'll get the ball in the corner, knock down a shot. And he just hasn't been able to do that this year. I mean, we look back at the Hoosier hysteria. He was along with Sarah Scalia in that three-point contest where they just ran through the competition.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, Sarah Scalia might have carried him just a little bit, but Gabe Cupps is still a great shooter, was known as a great shooter coming in here from Centerville in Ohio. He needs to get his confidence, and he needs to start knocking down these shots.
I want to say it was 19 for 25 in that Hoosier hysteria, something ridiculous.
It was ridiculous. Yeah. There's no question about that. We'll get moving on about another player who is known as a shooter and had an actually really good performance against Purdue. A lot of these came in garbage time, but still nonetheless knocked down shots. CJ Gunn, 13 points in 20 minutes of play and knocked down 3 triples. It was really calming, I guess, to see him be able to knock down those shots, because as a shooter, you see one go down and it's lights out from there and you gain your confidence back. So that could be something to note going further.
Yeah, I think a big part of that as well is I think there could have been a lot more success if CJ Gunn maybe had gone in a little bit earlier.
Yes.
And, I mean, you said it before. I mean, Purdue, was it with the 6-minute mark in the first half that they went on a 15-5 run? I mean, points like that, I don't know exactly when CJ Gunn had gone in the first half. But, I mean, if your starters are not performing the way that you need them to perform, you need to test out some sparks on the bench. You really do. And
wow, it's that simple.
I think the first person that subbed in was Peyton Sparks. And I think that was another thing that Khalil Ware wasn't performing poorly either. Yeah, he was in a little bit of foul trouble at the time, I think. But again, I mean, if he's not performing in a poor way that is affecting your team, I think you keep him in. And I mean, especially in a point that can really be the deciding factor of the game. So I think they should have just kept the people that are performing well in, and the people that aren't, take them out, try and find a spark on the bench. And if CJ Gunn had gone in a little bit earlier, he could have gotten those 13 points in the more important point of the game and maybe even more.
Yeah, I agree with your CJ Gunn getting subbed in earlier point. He was one of, if not maybe the brightest spot for Indiana. It's tough to judge that because, like you said, a lot of it was in garbage time. But still, you when you're playing garbage time, you got to make those minutes count, and he certainly did. 3 for 4 from beyond the arc, 4 for 6 in general. If you take him out, Indiana's 1 for 12 as a team compared to Zach Edey's 1 for 1.
Wow.
So CJ Gunn, not only bolstered the numbers on paper, but he made it more respectable than it otherwise would have been. They lost by 20 without Gunn. Maybe they lose by 30. I thought they were very productive minutes for Gunn. He's had an up and down season, but he's right back on the high note, and hopefully he can continue it into Northwestern.
This kind of just came to my mind. He's obviously not the way he plays, but his scoring output so far this season, I guess kind of the way he plays. It reminds me of where Tamar Bates was at this point in the season last year, which shout out to Tamar Bates. He is killing it with the Missouri Tigers right now. I believe I looked at it earlier today. In SEC conference play alone, he's averaging like 18 points a game on ridiculous shooting splits. So big shout out to Tamar Bates. Love to see you thriving over there in the SEC. But he reminds me of where Tamar was at this point in the season last year, because Tamar had gone scoreless in a couple of different games at this point last year, and he wasn't just really getting a lot of minutes, but whenever he did get those minutes, he performed really well. So I think this could also be a point for CJ Gunn. Maybe learn from your past mistakes and maybe put him in for a couple more minutes than you normally would, and he's going to be able to showcase his talent, especially this weekend against Northwestern with Northwestern down a man. We'll talk about that here in just a short amount of time. You have those opportunities to get that small ball lineup in there and to really showcase his talents. And guys, with 7 games left in the season, Indiana currently is at 14-10 and 6-7 at Big Ten play. Just really, what are your expectations for this team? What do you really want to see from this ball club? They're 2-5 in their last 7. They have some favorable matchups coming up. They don't really play a top team here for a little bit until they play Wisconsin at home. They don't play too many difficult teams on the road. I say difficult teams, but there's certainly teams there in there that can give them some fits. Just really, what do you want to see from this team coming down the stretch?
I think overall, these last couple of games may be the most important of the season for Indiana. I think it'll really determine just how much of a team they actually are, in a sense. I think it'll be really important to see how they do come together in these last couple of games. Because, I mean, theoretically, if you do come out and go win out these last couple of games and you head into the tournament on a hot streak, and you do well in the tournament,
they'd be 21-10.
21-10.
That's
Imagine
last year.
look at if they, I mean, don't go off of my words, but like if they win the tournament, you're in the NCAA tournament.
No, you are.
So these last couple of games will be very, very important to see just how much they do stick together. Especially these last 8 days would have been very important to see how they adjust in practice and how they will adjust against a good Northwestern team, which we'll get into in a second. But overall, expectation-wise, I think my expectations will be to see just how much they do stick together. And if you are looking at these next 7 games as just waiting for the season to be over or something like that. So I think if you're actually motivated in the sense that you think you can win out these last couple of games and win the Big Ten tournament, you're in a good spot in the rest of the season.
I'm really not going to add too much to that. I want to point out they haven't won back-to-back games, according to my quick calculations, since December 21st and December 29th against North Alabama and Kennesaw State. They've had plenty of opportunities, obviously, and they just haven't done it. So I was going to say, I would love for them to win out. But let's start with 2 in a row. Let's start with first get the one against Northwestern.
Let's start with one.
Exactly. Start with Northwestern, and then who they have after that. Nebraska
at home,
at Penn State
on the road,
Wisconsin at home, at Maryland, at Minnesota, and you finish off the regular season at home against Michigan State. Those are all very winnable games. But again, I don't even want to look at the entire slate. Let's start with Northwestern, win the games you're supposed to win, and then we'll get to the Big Ten tournament. And then if you win that, all of a sudden you're in. But just do what you're supposed to do and take it from there. If I'm them, I'm honestly not looking at the entire 7 games. I'm looking at Northwestern. You said they need to come together. I couldn't agree more. That Captain Galloway says the same exact thing every single press conference. They need to come together. It's what he said during that one halftime when they came back against Penn State. And really, it's just as simple as that. They need to come together, especially it hasn't been a conventional season. We all know that. They've been dealing with injuries. There's 10 new faces. But at this point in time, there's 7 games left. Enough with the excuses. Do what you're supposed to do and see what happens.
I'll certainly say this Indiana team could just become resume killers to end out the season, just like the 2018-2019 Indiana team was whenever they were absolutely horrendous, probably worse than this team, but it's hard to get worse than 100th in KenPom at their current point in time at this time of the season. But they could really become resume killers and start knocking off some of these top teams. I mean, heck, if you can beat Wisconsin at home, beat a really good Northwestern team at home, they don't really have any flashy games on the road to end out the season, but they've got some of those revenge games. I mean, they lost to Penn State here in Assembly Hall. They have a chance to avenge that loss at the Bryce Jordan Center on February 24th here. I believe that's next weekend, if my math serves me correctly. I'm not that good at math. But they've got a lot of really winnable games, like we've said. I mean, it's not out of the question that they could win out, but in my honest opinion, 7 games left this season, I'd like to see them at least go 4-3, if not 5-2. If they can do that, they can go into the Big Ten tournament and probably get around in a 7-6 seed around that point. And right there, you can maybe go on a miracle run, and I don't know. We're going to see. I like what you said, Thomas, though. Take it one game at a time, focus on Sunday against Northwestern, and then just go from there. And talking about the Northwestern Wildcats, that is exactly who Indiana will play next here in Assembly Hall, February 18th on a Sunday. Guys, really just what needs to change from what happened at the Purdue game on Saturday? Indiana's got a big rest 8 days after that game before this game coming up on Sunday. Really, what needs to change?
I think overall, I mean, again, I'm going to go back and attribute that loss to more of Purdue's dominance. And I mean, I think Indiana did kind of almost go along with the game plan that they wanted to use or wanted to do. But overall, I think what they need to do is play all 40 minutes of the game. I mean, you saw in these last couple of games, it's a good first half or it's a poor second half. It's a poor first half and then it's a good second half. I mean, that's not how you're going to, I mean, yeah, it may have worked for 1 or 2 games, but it's not how you're going to win if you want to win out these next 7 games and into the tournament. So I think these last couple of 8 days or in the middle of these 8 days now, which we're still in, will be very, very crucial. I know Kenya Hunter had said on the radio show that it was a very good first day of practice. And
which we really haven't heard that all season.
You haven't heard that. You're usually hearing from Mike Woodson practices have been horrible.
Yep.
So I think that will be very important to see what that exactly means. It could mean, yeah, it was really, really good, and now Indiana's going to go into this very confident, but then get hit by a very, very good Northwestern team and just get thrown into a complete lackluster. So overall, I think Indiana just needs to play all 40 minutes, stay together. That's exactly what I've been saying these last couple of podcast episodes. But, I mean, you're in a point of the season where you have the potential to go very, very downhill. And you're very much on the cusp, if not on the bad side of that. So they just overall need to stay together and consistently fight.
Yep. 100%. I think the other part of that is foul trouble. And, again, a large part of that was just Purdue's defense and Purdue's dominance in general. But Malik Renew and Khalil Ware, obviously 2 massive cornerstones of this team, if not the 2 biggest.
Yeah.
And Malik Renew fouling out, obviously that was detrimental to the Hoosiers. So if he can watch that, and he's had foul, obviously last year he had a lot of foul trouble, and this year he's been much, much better at that, but still not perfect. So if he can fix that, and then also same with Khalil Ware. If we talked about that was a turning point in the game. He picked up those 3 fouls, and Woodson, no matter what, he's just kind of looked like he thinks he knows what's best, and if you get 3 fouls, he's going to do what he thinks is best and pull you. So they need those 2 guys, amongst everyone else, but especially those 2 guys. You want one of the 2, if not both, on the floor at all times. So if they can keep themselves to make the right decisions, especially on the defensive end, and at least just stay in the game, even if they're not dominating the offensive end. Just keep themselves available to stay in the game because they need them defensively more than anything.
Yeah, I'm going to say all I really want to see from Indiana is just some fight. I want to see them honestly just get angry after that Purdue loss. You just got embarrassed again on national TV. Well, I mean, national TV, that's a stretch. I heard that the Fox broadcast was actually very spotty, especially there to start off the game. I heard that Gus and Jim weren't even really on for the first couple minutes. Audrey, did you touch something in the production truck whenever you were back there?
No, I was watching the broadcast that first half. I think it was the second half that was bad.
I was going to say the second half.
There was the second.
There was a moment where, the screen, went colored, and then a message popped up error or something like that.
Nice.
It was actually, and then we were wondering, if it was just our media room TV, but no, we hop on Twitter and everyone's complaining, and it definitely sounded like a mess.
Yeah, but I'll just say, I want Indiana to just show some fight after another embarrassing loss, which they have been able to do that as of recent. They've gotten a really poor loss, and then they've really responded well after those losses. It's just the fact, like what you said, Thomas, can they be able to string those wins together? And again, we'll talk about that as the season progresses. But I'll also say about Northwestern, you need to attack the basket against these Wildcats because Northwestern is not a tall team. Indiana is, and the Wildcats will foul you. They send teams to the free throw line more than almost any team in the country. Opposing teams average around 22% of their total points at the free throw line. That's 35th in the nation. That's not where you want to be if you're Northwestern. So attack the basket. They're going to foul you. You just have to be able to knock in your free throws, which has been a problem for Indiana basketball for quite some time. I will say the eight day break to kind of reset themselves mentally and physically, that's going to be huge for them, because the last time we saw that long of a break was between Wisconsin and Illinois. Granted, Indiana didn't win that Illinois game, but it was one of their best performances I've seen so far this season, despite the loss.
Yep.
Real quick, we'll break down the Wildcats here really quick. I don't know how much you guys have watched Northwestern this season. For me, I don't know how, but I've just found myself watching Northwestern quite a bit. They've been great to watch. They're 17-7 so far this season. They're 8-5 in Big Ten play, one of the top teams once again in the Big Ten. I kind of wrote them off after last year. I didn't think they were going to be as good this season, with a lot of pieces leaving after last season, but they are good. A big point in this game is that Northwestern will be without one of their star players in Ty Berry. He tore his meniscus and is out for the rest of the season, per sources earlier this day that we're recording the podcast on Wednesday. But I'll say, beyond Ty Berry, which is going to be a huge blow to their offense, this is still a terrifying Northwestern offense. Whenever they're on, they're absolutely deadly, guys.
Yeah, and I think especially with Ty Berry now out for the season, I think it's going to be another Boo Buoy massive game. And Boo Buoy gives some scares to some Hoosier fans. I mean, how they won that last game. I mean, it is going...
Pushed off. I'll say that. That's all I'll say. And we'll keep on going.
We'll keep going. But yeah, I think now, I mean, Northwestern plays Rutgers tomorrow. We're filming this on Wednesday, so they play them on Thursday at Rutgers. So it'll be interesting to see how Northwestern plays in that game and how Rutgers handles that. But yeah, like you said, it's going to be very, very big. It's literally going to be very, very big, because Indiana does have that advantage of being a very big team. So they're going to need to use that to their advantage. And I think now Indiana does have that advantage of an 8-day break, while Northwestern will only have a 3-day break.
I'm not good at math.
Neither am I. So this is not a good combination.
I think it should be 3.
3.
There we go.
Thank you.
At least we've got Thomas.
We've got Thomas.
You're the math guy over here.
Thanks, Thomas. But yeah, so that is the advantage, that one of the other advantages that Indiana has. So just to see how both teams adjust to that. Northwestern is definitely the team that needs to adjust a little bit more now, with one of their biggest offensive keys out for the season.
I'll just add that I think this 8-day break is going to be very, very helpful for the Hoosiers. They had one earlier that you have written down here, Wisconsin from Illinois. That was a very nice break for Indiana. Both those games, they fought hard. Wisconsin obviously ran away with that game, and they had a lights-out shooting performance. I thought I was watching the 2016 Warriors, honestly. But Illinois was also a good game. It just didn't go their way. But I think the break is always beneficial. The players have touched on it. Woodson said he's looking forward to this break. It gives them a nice reset, especially coming off a really, I'll describe it, a tough Wisconsin Purdue loss. And this is a great opportunity to get a great win back at home. Galloway and Woodson said they needed to defend home court. They're back at home. I think the game tomorrow against Rutgers is also going to be a nice preview for the Hoosiers. I'm sure they'll all be tuning in and watching that and see what they have coming for them on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, again, I've really enjoyed watching this Northwestern team play basketball this season. That overtime game in West Lafayette against Purdue earlier, only a couple weeks ago, actually, that was so entertaining. The game earlier this season in December against Purdue in Northwestern, that was incredible. I've watched a couple other games. I watched their game against Michigan State, their game against Illinois back at home in Welsh Ryan Arena. This is a fun Illinois, whoa. Sorry, that is going to anger a lot of Northwestern fans. I apologize. The Northwestern Wildcats are a very fun team to watch. I'll say Illinois is also fun to watch, but Northwestern, they shoot 39% from the three-point line, which is 6th in the nation.
Wow.
Very efficient offense. They're 34th in adjusted efficiency. They don't turn the ball over a tremendous amount, which you really don't see that from teams that play kind of a paced offense like Northwestern plays. But without Tiberi, again, that's going to be a huge blow to them. But they picked up a great piece over the offseason in Ryan Langford, the Princeton transfer. If you all remember watching the Princeton run last year, he was very crucial to their style of basketball. And he's been great once again this season. So he's more than likely going to be thrusted into the starting lineup alongside Boo Buie, Brooks Barnheiser, all those guys. It's a really good Northwestern team, and Indiana's going to be tested against the Wildcats on Sunday, and especially considering Indiana has not beaten Northwestern in Assembly Hall since 2020. Fans weren't even in attendance the last time that Indiana beat the Wildcats in Assembly Hall. And again, without Tiberi, it's just a question of, is Indiana ready to actually play against a good Northwestern team? So we'll get to our final two segments before we end things here in a shortened episode of the Throwing Chairs podcast. We'll get started with our player or players to watch. Thomas, we'll get started with you. Just give me some players to watch here.
I got two. One, I'm going to go with Malik Renew. He's coming off one of his worst performances, but he fouled out and he had a tough task with Purdue, but still holds true. Woodson said he wasn't playing like himself. I'm sure those comments hurt, but they're also true, and that's also probably why it hurts. And so I'm sure he's looking for a bounce-back game. This is Indiana's, one of them, I should say, on the court. And, yeah, I'm expecting a big game from Renew, and we know he's more than capable of doing that. And then I'm going to go to Galloway. Galloway was Indiana's saint and savior for Ohio State. And I don't remember if I picked him as my player to watch for Purdue. I think he must have been one of them at least. But he had a solid first half, and then it was just a complete drop-off in that second half. We know he was frustrated with his performance. We heard him in that post-game press conference. And I think he's going to bounce back as well. This is a game, we've been saying it for weeks at this point, that every single game is a game that they need to win, and it just holds true every single time. This is the game they need to win. They're back at home. Galloway said he was excited to defend home court. This is their opportunity. I'm going to go with Renew and Galloway.
Yeah. Going off of that, I mean, you have to defend home court. That's just really kind of the main piece of it. And I just want to mention something really quick, and I just remembered off the top of my head, but during media day, Indiana basketball media day, I talked to Xavier Johnson, and tough. I asked him what game he was most looking forward to, and he said Northwestern, because he'd never played Northwestern or he's never won against Northwestern. I want to say it was played. So it's tough to think about that. I mean, I think this is definitely something that Xavier Johnson will play a key role just on leadership off of the bench. I think he definitely wants this win for Indiana. And, I mean, having been with the team now for 3 years...
This is his third season.
Yeah, 3 seasons now. So, yeah, I mean, it stinks that he will most likely be watching this game from off the bench. But kind of going off of his position, my two players, I'm going with two. One for offensively and one for defensively. Offensively, I'm going with Trey Galloway, like you said. I think this will be very, very crucial to see how he does step up from that Purdue game, because in these later games, he has been the one to step up offensively. So I think especially being back at home, I think he is also one of the people on the team that knows just how crucial a win like this would be, especially over a good Northwestern team. And then defensively, I'm going to go with Gabe Cupps. I think overall their guard play is going to be very, very, very important for Sunday's game, because, I mean, you're going to have a very, very hot Boo Buie, and he is going to be just shooting on, like he's probably going to be their main offensive target. So how both, I guess, Trey Galloway and Gabe Cupps especially are going to have to contain him will be very, very interesting to see. But yeah, overall, I think if they can get Gabe Cupps going offensively too, I think overall Indiana's guard play is going to be very important for this game. So, but I will stick with Trey Galloway on the offensive end and Gabe Cupps on the defensive end.
I'm going to go a little bit of an unorthodox approach to this, and I'm going to say my player to watch is Boo Buie. And the reason I'm going to say that is because if Boo Buie is on, it is game over for the Hoosiers. If Boo Buie scores 20-plus points, Indiana will most certainly lose this basketball game. He's easily one of the best players in the Big Ten. There's no question about it. I mean, it's either going to be Trey Galloway or Gabe Cupps on him to play defense. I'm probably going to say it's going to be Trey Galloway to defend Boo Buie. I just don't think Gabe Cupps just won't be able to keep up with Boo Buie. He doesn't understand how Buie plays. Galloway does. He's been here as long as Boo Buie has been. So Trey Galloway will more than likely probably be on Buie. So he has to lock down on him defensively, and he just has to limit his shots because this is one of the best shot makers, if not in the Big Ten, in the nation, and they're just kind of have to be able to watch out for him. Again, if he's on, it's over. So we'll get to our final segment here before we end things on TCP. Predictions for Sunday night's game. Excuse me. It's actually not even on Sunday night. Sunday afternoon, a 3 o'clock game.
3 p.m. tip.
It's a beautiful tip-off. So we'll just get our... who do I want to go to first?
I have mine loaded up.
I have mine ready to go.
Oh, wow.
All right,
Wow.
I'm going to go, actually. I'm going to go. If this was on the road, I think Northwestern, no question, would win this basketball game. So, with that being said, Northwestern is a terrible team whenever they play on the road. They are a completely different basketball team whenever they play away from Welsh Ryan Arena. They've only won one road game in the Big Ten, and that only road game being against the Penn State Nittany Lions, and that one took place on January 10th. In the whole grand scheme of things, they've only won 2 road games this entire season. The only other one at that is 300th and Kempom DePaul on the road, and even at that, am I reading that right? They won 56-46. Now that is absolutely incredible. And then they only beat Penn State 76-72. So there's no question this game at least should be a close game. And so I'm going to take Indiana to win this basketball game 74-67. A very long-winded response, but I had to get my point across. I'm going to take Indiana 74-67. With that being said, we'll go to Audrey.
Kind of going off of that, I think you made a very good point, is that Northwestern doesn't perform as well on the road. So I think Indiana also, like I said before, has that advantage of having that 8-day break. And it sounds like from what Kenya Hunter said on the radio show that it's going well. So with that being said, I'm going to pull Hayden. I'm going to go with Indiana 82-75. I think it'll be a little bit more of a high-scoring game. I think it'll be tough to contain Boo Buie. I think he does have his way, but I think that overall Indiana does have the advantage of having those big men, and Malik Renew, Khalil Ware will probably have big games. And then if Trey Galloway can, I think it'll be a big Boo Buie against Trey Galloway game. So seeing how that kind of plays out, I think will be the deciding factor.
See, I do think it's going to be a high-scoring game, but the only reason I didn't go with that is because if it is a high-scoring game, I think Northwestern wins, because if it is, that means that Boo Buie is going off and Brooks Barnheiser is going off. So with that being said, we'll go with Thomas.
I was going to say 74-70, but then you gave us a lot of very great information, and you also picked 74.
You can go with
No,
your
you
I
go
don't want that. I don't want that. My
Go with your heart, Thomas.
This is my heart.
Okay.
Before it was my brain. Now I'm going with my heart.
I think you should write down 74-70 just to be safe.
You
Because
said
if
it. You said
you
it.
did
No, but I
say
said
it.
That's not the official one. That's
We're
not
not
the
doing
official
that.
one.
Go for it,
All of this
Thomas.
information that was presented to me. If I went first, I would have said it, but I didn't go first. So my official one, after all the information that was just presented to me, is I want 71-63. Indiana.
Indiana.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
Indiana is going to win 74-70.
Yeah, if they do, I'm counting the win.
I don't know about that,
No, you're not.
Thomas. I don't know about that. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Throwing Chairs podcast. Be sure to follow the Hoosier Network on all of our social media platforms to stay up to date on Indiana basketball. Until next time, alongside Audrey Marr, Thomas Montalbano, I'm Hayden Smith, hanging up the phone on this episode of TCP. Have a great day, Hoosier fans, and happy Valentine's Day.